was waiting. I was waiting.
Is this that low chair? Or?
No, it's not. This is the low chair.
I'd like to call this meeting to order. We just came out of closed session, and direction was given on items 1, 2, and 4. We're going to reconvene on items number 3. No action taken. Madam Clerk, can we have the roll call, please?
Councilmember Pittman.
Here.
Councilmember Smith.
Here.
Councilmember Draper.
Here.
Councilmember Hatley.
Here.
Councilmember Goodson.
Here.
Vice Mayor Thompson.
Here.
Mayor Reynolds.
Here. Would you please stand for the flag salute? Salute. Pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, this is a special meeting regarding the cow water increase. Do we have a presentation on that?
Just a very brief one. I would indicate that on February 14th, the PUC is going to hold a hearing actually in these chambers. We did talk to them and try and get the venue changed. Jackie actually did quite a bit of work in trying to get it changed, and they decided they'd rather hold it here. Several council members have requested that the council take a position opposing that rate increase, which is why we're here in a special meeting, so that we're prepared to present that should council approve it at that hearing. So the purpose of this is for council to consider a resolution regarding the rate increase.
Okay. Do we have any speakers on this?
Mr. Mayor, I have 4 speakers. So I have Jack Kiley and then Steve Terry.
Good evening, council. We have that one. Oops. go up
Yes,
on that.
so, yeah, we could.
I'll give you a packet there which basically sort of describes where we are in the rate increases, what's happened in the last 10 years. And you can see, I'm looking at the chart here, which you have there, that they're pretty self-explanatory. Our two local control deals have stayed relatively flat, and we've gone from $1.46 to $3.65, and they're proposing. On the second page is Cal Water's current proposal there. And if you total that out, the first year is the $511,000, but that's going to be for 3 years. So you total that out for 3 years, and the next one is $161,000 for 2 years. What they're looking at here is what the customers in Oroville, what we're paying approximately $5 million for at the end of 3 years will be $7 million. And so this thing goes off scales. And I guess the two questions we will have for the CPUC and Cal Water at this meeting, you guys have been here for 90 years. 80% of your pipelines are over 50 years old. You multiply that out of what it would cost to bring those up to date, would be around $65 million. So this gap would only widen in the future. What I'm going to seek is that we cut their rates in half, and the usage would go up 40%. They'd still get their revenue, and we'd maybe have green lawns in town again, and our businesses would be completed. So I would encourage you to adopt the resolutions. A 7-0 vote will send a strong message to the CPUC and Cal Water. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Kiley.
Steve Terry and then Celia Hirschman.
Good evening, Council. I'm going to speak just from the standpoint of business in town. As most of you know, I run the Oroville Rescue Commission. No, we're not in city limits, although I have requested annexation, so we would be. Right now, the bill for a homeless shelter at the Oroville Rescue Commission, donor-funded homeless shelter, we're well over $400 a month. This is going to jack it up. We're going to be paying anywhere from $5 to $6, almost $6.50 a month for water at the mission. This is a homeless shelter. Over $600 a month for water. Outrageous. My personal water's on Cal Water. I'm not even addressing that issue tonight. I'm telling you the rates and the way they're going up. Why aren't we seeing the other ones go up too? This is out of control, and we need to put a control on it. I urge you to support the resolution.
Thank you.
Celia Hirschman and then George Barber.
Hi. I'm one of 3 people that 3 years ago, Cal Water is allowed to ask for a rate increase every 3 years per the California Public Utilities Commission, and I founded an organization that ended up taking Cal Water to court 3 years ago, or 5 years ago, for their last rate increase. And we didn't really see great gains there. We went through a 1.5-year process. We did it legally. We got help from Scott Huber. It was all arranged here on this platform at City Council. The reason that Cal Water has a problem is because in 2008, they went from a model of everything you can eat, all you can eat, to per gallon virtually how much water you use, and they created a 3-tier system, and the California Public Utilities Commission asked them to do that because of conservation. The amount of money they're asking for now, so our rates have gone over the roof, and the 2 other public entities are nowhere near that. And the reason, they'll tell you they're only asking for 5%, but that's not true. They're asking for 5% based on the drought and all the problems we had 3 years ago. So they're incrementally making us poorer and poorer with water. They're going to tell you that they give money to churches, that they give money to your organizations, your clubs, that you need to look out for us. We're first. Here's my bill. This is from August last year. I didn't have a lawn. I did have a garden. My bill was $198.15. Now, I don't have a lawn. I'm one person. I really think that the City Council has to take a far more realistic look, and I would be happy to be involved in that. I know a lot about Cal Water, and there are quite a few people here that do as well. It's an opportunity for the city to take back its resource. Thank you.
Time.
Thank you.
George Barber.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and Council. This is going to be hard to do in 2 minutes. I got notified yesterday at 3 o'clock of this meeting. The substance is Cal Water. We should have had a chance to make a presentation tonight. But I'm going to say really quickly that the council should not adopt this resolution. What I would like you to see is put this off to a workshop to where we can provide all the information you need to make a correct decision. The whereases in this resolution that are provided, they're based upon incorrect information and misstatement of facts, frankly. I'm not sure why we needed to turn this around so fast in a special meeting, 24 hours with little notice for me to deal with. This entity can provide input to the PUC beyond the February 14th date. They will listen to this entity and your input without a doubt. You were told at the previous meeting about the difference between revenue and rate increase. This resolution doesn't designate there's a difference between revenue and rate increase. Whereas number 4, a rate study that was commissioned by this city doesn't even support that generalization. Whereas number 5 is a sweeping generalization, and Cal Water is the only entity in the area with the low rate assistance program. And a low rate assistant customer spends about 1.5% of their median income on their water service. Whereas number 9, trying to find my notes and hurry through this, that's incorrect. Whereas number 11, where it says approximately half, 4183 in Chico versus 6001. I'm not a math major, I am an engineer.
Time.
So 4183 over $60 is not half. And you result.
Thank you, Mr. Barber.
Okay, thanks.
I'd like to ask a question. Why was this not a presentation? Why was it in the comments?
The request was, in fact, to be able to pass this resolution prior to the 14th hearing, and it had not been agendized, so we agendized it this way. Certainly, the council could, in the future, request a full presentation.
Okay. Are there any comments from the dais?
Clearly, Cal Water is low-hanging fruit. Clearly, Cal Water is low-hanging fruit in regards to public opinion. My concern is the rapid kind of foisted upon both the public and the dais without really having a full opportunity to digest the resolution and all of the facts therein. And I think it's important that we have adequate time to fully document a lot of the items that are in here, because there are some. I have some questions. Personally, I remember when I was out there last year, and I believe it was the hospital had paid for, Bob Wentz had paid for a study to look at this issue and compare the rates and whatnot. And a presentation was made, I think, somewhere in June or July of last year regarding this issue. And at that time, part of the issue was, yeah, absolutely, Cal Water rates are significantly higher. There was some explanation that was provided as to why that was. In part, first of all, we have 3 water districts and a very small community, and so the cost of doing business, when you take the cost and you spread that over the various businesses, the cost is much higher. For an example, I don't know how many of you know this, but when you go to Walmart, you pay more at the Oroville Walmart than you do at the Walmart in Sacramento. In part, that's because our community is small. So there are business forces that certainly are at issue here. The other piece was that South Feather Water is subsidized. So all of us that are in that district, we enjoy a great big subsidy versus Cal Water. So my reaction to this is that though Cal Water, then I think there are certainly issues. Certainly we all want lower water bills. Certainly, many of us pay these bills that are in the various areas where we're subject to them. But at the same time, I want to see results at the end of the day. I know there are those that are up here on the dais that ran in part a couple of years ago on seeing those water rates lowered, and that in part probably was why they were successful in their bid for city council. But at the end of the day, we're still saddled with high rates. We're still saddled with the same issues. And so, and I don't particularly have all the answers as to why that is. So I'm just a little resident at saying yes to something and ensuring that all of the pieces are absolutely factually based, because this will go before the PUC on the 14th here in this very room, 6 o'clock. And so that's going to be litigated or discussed. And I think it's very, very important that as a body here that we have all our facts absolutely in order. Because what happens is that you end up, if your facts are not spot on, you end up diluting, no pun intended, the impact of your argument. And so I think that it's important that all these facts are spot. And I can't. I haven't had the opportunity to research to ensure that everything here that I'm assigning onto is absolutely factual. The other point that I wanted to make was that when I looked at some documentation, Cal Water had put forth a couple of different ideas, and that was in combining districts. Oroville is a very small district. We have actually 3 water districts. Most of you are aware of that. And hence, again, that's what drives costs. Small water districts spread out over just a few folks drives up cost of doing business. So one of the ideas was to combine Chico and Gridley, Oroville, and by doing that, then you spread out those administrative costs greatly amongst a much larger group of people. And that was something that Cal Water had actually put forward. So I would like to have the opportunity to explore real ideas that potentially could have results at the end of the day. Otherwise, we're just right back here again. We're arguing against a very large corporation. They're a private company. I know that there's been floated out the idea of eminent domain. And with all of these various ideas and solutions, there's always the unintended consequences. And so I want to have smart policy, make sense, and have an opportunity to fully digest this rather than just, hey, you know what, let's beat up on Cal Water today, because that's the easy thing to do. That's the popular thing to do. That's what the people want to hear us do. And I certainly want to deliver lower water rates. And at the end of the day, that would be the goal and the objective. I'm just not sure by doing this here tonight, in the context to which this has been drafted, that's going to produce that result. And then I have many other things that I could just go on, for far too long about that. But anyway, that's just my initial comment.
Council Member Draper.
Well, as Council Member Smith mentioned, there were some of us who ran on the issue of lowering Oroville water rates. And I said many times during my campaign 2 years ago that was my goal, and it has been my goal. And I have continued to work toward that. I don't see this resolution as a slap in the face to Cal Water. I see it more as support for the people of Oroville and the businesses of Oroville that are subjected to these high water rates. And we all know, those of us who are Cal Water users, that when people buy houses now, they inquire, is this with South Feather or Thermalito or Cal Water? And it makes a difference. We also know that businesses now coming to town, they also check on this, because it can make a difference of hundreds of dollars a month in a business's water bill if they buy a place in Cal Water's jurisdiction. So it has been a time-consuming process for Lower and other individuals in our community that are working for low water rates here. The council requested that LAFCO study that Bob Wentz paid for. In January 2017, 2 years ago. And I'll tell you, it took a year and a half with LAFCO. We just got that back in June of 2018. So now there are other avenues that may be pursued, maybe some suggestions that different groups have made will be fruitful. But we need to support our water ratepayers here in town. Real estate prices, of course, plummet when you have dead yards. We talk about curb appeal when we watch those home improvement shows. We don't have curb appeal for people that have Cal Water. They have dead lawns, and we let ours die. I don't know, I think it's been 3 years ago. We just let it die. And we only water our trees and shrubs, and our bill still runs $50 to $60 a month. And so people say, well, cut back. Well, people in Oroville use 40% less water than the Cal Water users in Chico, and it's about double. And the more we cut back, the more they raise the rates. So I would encourage anyone who's concerned to show up at that CPUC meeting on February 14th and make your concerns heard. Last time we did that, they got a 2.7% rate increase instead of a much more substantial one that they wanted. So you do have some influence. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Pittman, please.
Thank you, sir. I kind of agree with Mr. Councilman Smith. The issue of the resolution came fast and furious. I have no problems with 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I would like to see the rate study, looked at the rate study that was done and verified number 5. And also, if we're going to produce a resolution, I certainly would like to have the numbers be accurate. It's the only way we have credibility. So if there's a question about the numbers, I would like those to be reviewed and made sure to be correct. I also would like to add a 13 item. What is the city's cost experience with water? Because we have a lot of parks, and we have a pretty good water bill. So it'd be good to have that in this resolution. And then in number 3 of the bottom, it mentions the city council directs staff to explore alternatives to provide water to the city's residents who currently receive water service from Cal Water. I understand the intent of that, but that's a pretty wide statement, and we have a pretty skeleton crew around here. So I would like to see that either narrowed down to exactly what should be done. I'd also like to see that add, including discussions with Cal Water as to maybe explore alternatives that Mr. Smith made mention about what could the company do to help us, go down the path of cheaper water. I mean, that's a big deal. Those are my concerns with this particular resolution. I have no problem supporting the issue, but certainly any resolution that we put forth needs to be accurate, and that's all I'm really looking at, just to be accurate with the numbers. The other question I have for staff, and I've had this asked of me, so I'm going to ask it now. As we have seen so many dried up lawns, choosing not to irrigate, is there a big problem in ordinances if people choose to remove the lawn and make that off-street parking? Is that prohibitive in our zoning ordinances? As a general rule, I'm not looking at any specific property, but as I go through around San Francisco, the lawns down there are postage stamp size, and that's the choice they made. And maybe it could add some value to the property if we had more off-street parking to folks. I know it changes the landscape and changes that, but I don't want to say that to people and then have a city rule that says, oh, you can't do that. So generally, if someone came in and said, hey, we want to take our lawn and make it their driveway or parking lot, is that problematic?
This is Gary Lehman. I notice you're looking at me as the zoning administrator, but there's nothing in our municipal code that says that they cannot provide additional parking onto their site.
Right.
It just says that they have to provide covered parking for residential.
And in some of our areas where we have difficulty in parking, it might be advantageous to people to provide more off-street parking for their particular parking. I know we have areas that parking is a problem and permits have been issued. So that's something that we might explore too, and some resolution to this process. So those are my concerns.
Thank you. Vice Mayor Thompson.
3 quick points. One of them being as a newlywed, February 14th for a meeting is a little distasteful, but my wife and I do plan on being there because it is important for us. We understand that this is important for our city. I personally believe, and I think it's pretty straightforward, that the rates for Cal Water in the region are high. And I think that I know that there are a lot of people that live in our city limits. I know they do offer those who have low income to get pay decreases or rate decreases, but I believe that that Cal Water needs to look at some other options to make their ends meet. So that's all I have to say.
Thank you. Councilmember Draper.
Well, Councilman Pittman mentioned things that Cal Water might do to decrease their rates. And I was noticing that some suggestions made by North Star Engineering, the consultant on that LAFCO study, they said, number 1, Cal Water could purchase raw water from one of the other agencies. Number 2, the 3 water providers could consider the possibility of treatment consolidation because currently there are 3 companies operating 3 separate treatment plants. And of course, 2 of them are upgraded. One is quite old, and we know which one that is. But at any rate, there are things that could be done. I haven't heard about any of those being implemented yet, but it would be nice to see something like that. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there some sort of law or code that prevents anyone from using a well or digging a well for their water downtown?
Yes.
There is.
There are.
So this is pretty much the only option is Cal Water.
Let me rephrase that. There are some pretty good restrictions in place about drilling new wells in a residential area.
Well, I know there's a Sanborn map that these downtown houses have wells in place. There's a law against reactivating them.
No, we'd have to look at it. I was under the impression you were talking about like new wells. I'd have to look at it.
Okay, I'm just trying to weigh options here for people. I understand. I've had property in all the districts, so I'm aware of all the rates and all the bills. But okay, well,
Chuck.
Yes.
Yeah. Going back to my other comments.
Councilmember Smith.
Yeah, thank you. I would feel much better given the amount of dollars that the previous council had. Well, actually, it was paid for by the hospital.
By Mr. Wentz.
By Mr. Wentz, yes. That, those are an enormous amount. Again, it kind of goes back to a lot of comments that you hear over time, that we spend a lot of money on studies and then nothing's ever done. And I just think that it's smart to draw back to what Ms. Draper was pointing out, to some of the suggested possible fixes to some of the high bills. And I would just feel better if some of that we had more time to put together a more thorough resolution that would include some of those things, that it would embody that, the time and energy that was put forth to develop that. I think that just makes a lot more sense than just kind of quickly having a special meeting and then with the potential of some inaccuracies in some of these numbers. I'm not a Cal Water fan, trust me. What I'm about here is results and looking back to the past and looking back to the conflict that has ensued. And I just don't want to see more of the same. And I'm planning on going to that meeting likewise on the 14th to make comments about this issue. But again, it's about results. So it's about having a smartly put together resolution that is forward thinking, that will have results. Just to humor me for a moment, in number 2, it talks about that you've already done the stagnant economic growth. There's a lot of change that's happened in the last few months here in Oroville. We are turning the corner. And I always just think in terms of how we're presenting ourselves as a city. Are we presenting ourselves in the terms of that we're under duress and we've suffered? Because I think about the implications of of framing ourselves up in this kind of context. Is that even accurate at this point in time? I mean, certainly we can point to parts of the city where there's a lot of challenges, but I would just prefer a piece that has more thought and more thoroughness and embodies some of the other information that's been gathered that a lot of money's been spent on, and then going back to even some of the other suggestions that were put forth by Cal Water itself about combining things. I just feel that that's more impactful, more effective, and has a greater potential to get the job. Because at the end of the day, what we want is lower water bills. That's what we want.
Thank you. Where did someone call me? Okay. Jeff? Approach, please.
Address the PUC hearings. I'm not trying to get into anything else, but the reason it's happening we didn't ask for it to be on Valentine's Day either. But what happened, if you look at the old resolution here, it was done April. And that's what we normally was done in April. We got a notice here 3 or 4 weeks ago that then all of a sudden we were going to have a hearing here in Oroville. And so that's why the rush has come about a little bit. If it had been in April, yes, we could have done that. But there's been a lot of issues discussed here. There's no big secrets on the water. But the reason for the hearing and the reason we're here tonight was, all right, we got a 14th hearing on that there. So that's why the time frame got pushed on us here to do it on the resolution. And the result was Dave Pittman was here. They spoke last time on the resolution. They were asking for around $2.4 million they got, which would have been for 3 years. And the council spoke strongly. The resolution had a lot to do with keeping that rate down to almost zero. And that's where we are. So that's just
thank you, Mr. Kiley. Mr. Lando, where did this information come from?
I'm going to defer to Scott since I didn't draft it.
Mr. Mayor, the vast majority of the information came from the ordinance that was passed by the council in 2016. I did update the numbers from paragraph number 6 was simply a statement of fact. They did receive a rate increase in 2016. I couldn't tell you what the number was, and as I was preparing this, I figured I'm just going to leave it at that. I don't know what the number was, or I would have put it in. Paragraph number 7 and 8 comes straight from the letter that Cal Water received. In fact, the table is included in the staff report. That literally is a copy and paste from the letter that's attached. That Cal Water's, or I guess it's not Cal Water's letter. It's the notice of the hearing that was sent by the PUC. That was straight out of the notice of hearing regarding residential metered service and non-residential metered service. As to almost all of the other information, almost all of that was from the prior resolution. I did in paragraph 9. It previously said Cal Water's rates have increased by almost 100% in the last 8 years. I figured we're now at 2019, so I'll add 3 more years to it. And I'm assuming that the data that Jack Kiley put up was correct. I think it shows that. But I have not independently verified that, to be candid with you. But so that's where it came from. It came from the ordinance that was passed. I'm sorry, the resolution that was passed in 2016.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Mr. Huber. Councilmember Draper.
Well, from what Councilman Smith has said about waiting for all the information, we waited 2 years, and all that information is already out there. It's in that LAFCO study. And from what I can see, this is accurate. And I see it, like I said before, as standing up for the residents of this town who have Cal Water. And we can just do nothing, that has happened before. But I think it's really kind of a nice thing to be supportive of 3,600 residents and businesses in this town that are under the burden of Cal Water rates. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Mayor, I do still have another.
Councilmember Smith.
I could stand behind this if number 3 was changed, that we would take into account the study presented by North Star in July of last year, I believe 2018. Not sure of exactly how, I hadn't thought through as far as the specific language, but that we would direct staff to reach out to Cal Water to explore viable solutions, to revisit the solutions that were presented by North Star Engineering in 2018, rather than, because it's essentially the same thing. Number 3, City Council directs staff to explore, but again, it comes back down, drilling down, no pun intended, the specifics and giving specific direction, because in there were some viable answers to potential rate savings for the folks. And again, I just don't want, just because it's low-hanging fruit, it's easy to beat up on Cal Water. I want to see results, okay? So if we could, can you put something together there, Scott, on that?
Yeah.
And I'd like to make a motion that we move forward.
Let me come up with something real quick.
And while he's doing that, I think that's an excellent idea. On number 3, we could just say the city encourages Cal Water to implement the ideas for saving or lowering the water rates that were presented in the LAFCO study.
Thank you. Councilmember Goodson.
I just want a clarification. So it's my understanding that you are in agreement with the whole of the resolution, aside from making a slight revision in the wording of number 3. The City Council directing, which is what Councilwoman Draper just suggested.
I would go with that. There's other pieces in here I'm not fully comfortable with, but just for the sake of time, and you know, in the nuances.
Could be.
He's drafting number 3. Councilmember Draper, are you in the queue?
Oh, no, that was earlier. Sorry.
Let me try this out, and I reserve the right to call it a bad idea on my own once I hear it out loud. But the City Council directs staff to explore alternatives with Cal Water related to some of the cost-saving solutions presented in the LAFCO study prepared by North Star.
Mm-hmm. That's great.
And any other cost saving. It's not limited to the study. Let's keep the discussion wide open.
Yeah, because one of the things that, you know, we want to see happen is where we begin to collaborate rather than always throwing, you know, jabs at one another. Let's start trying to pull this thing together, and that's kind of where I'm coming from on this.
Excuse me, Councilmember Smith. Councilmember Goodson's in the queue.
Okay, sorry.
Oh, okay. You don't need to in the queue. I'm sorry. Did you have another comment?
I'm good.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, we have an ordinance with an amendment to it. We're looking for a motion to accept the ordinance.
Resolution.
I move that we adopt the resolution.
Resolution.
I'll second that.
I move that we adopt the resolution number 8766 with the Oroville City Council in opposition to the water rate increase requested by Cal Water for Cal Water customers in Oroville, and inclusive of that revision that was submitted by City Attorney Scott Huber.
And I'll second that.
Motion carries.
Thank you. And with that, we're going to adjourn the special meeting. Before we open our regular meeting, what's that?
The term is reconvene.
Reconvene. Before we reconvene, I would like to take a 5-minute recess, please.
Get checked the same as You just have it locked. Okay, I need to go get checked.
Well, rates across the country are high. We were up in Coos Bay, and Susan's brother is paying $247 a month. And the reason is not availability, but the treatment costs are that high up there for whatever reason. And they're getting right off the Coquille River. And I said, the river's right down there. You got to pay that much? Yeah. Like,
in 1970, we looked at the I had a flat rate.
Right.
Council charge
well, and thank you very much for that, too. Flat rate. Not expensive. Tell me about it. I already thought one.
And then they
right. And so now everybody's got to pay a meter, and the meter is free. It's too much.
Yeah, I imagine you're on top of it.
Yeah. I can make a car payment when I pay that. Yeah. I only have 3 days. I'm just a little guy. Tenant guy, he pays a whole bunch more. The presentation. He's probably
So I think if you don't have a quarter at a march car anymore.
Shit, no.
You remember those days?
Well, I'm still at $1 for not you know what the thing is?
Robotical.
People still use quarters more than go figure. I don't know what it is. They're starting to pay credit card a little more. But it's only $1 started to get 4 minutes. That's pretty fair. We're busy. The thing that keeps it alive is the 2 apartments on top. The 2 apartments on top, that's what keeps us alive.
Yeah, those are rented out then, I guess.
Oh, yeah.
You have good people on them?
Yeah.
The
only thing that gets noisy is the air compressor. Put some mufflers around it, and it started working. So people no, there's 2 couples. One has some young kids, and the other no kids at all. But the thing about it is you're so high, you're like a whole different thing. You're not part of the downstairs at all. But it's also nice to have people coming around.
Have they, so,
850 square feet, so they can go back. I got over 3,000 square foot of trailer space. And they have great views. And the only thing they have is, the dairy, the trucks come over late night, 3 o'clock in the morning. People also like that because they know somebody's in there. Yeah. And people, the other thing we like about it, I can't tell you how many people come back from up there worry about being approached because of the shit our people walk up to. And over here, I'm down, somebody gets all pissed off. I get ladies every day saying, thank you very much. I have parents too. I buy it for Jack Redwood. I buy it for Jack Redwood. He was the investor. He was
Oh, yeah.
I put it in escrow 2 years ago. I said that's too much. 5 years later, I said,
Looks much nicer.
that guy got 150 grand, so you get that guy down 150. You've done something.
Oh, is that the one that Fred asked to have pulled? Okay. Let's put.
Got a kick out of my Susan, my neighbor, over Hill, she Hey, what was looking for you?
Very short. They're, when they start back, we have the adoption of the agenda. They're doing a proclamation, and then we go into public comment. So you've got about 15 minutes, maybe max.
Rousing speech. Oh, man. Well, we'll move the Cal Water egg down to the south. You'll get it, everybody will get an invitation here, but April 27th is Saturday. There is a...
So,
This is the last one.
oh, no, thank you. Well, what is it?
They're just Welch's fruit snacks.
Oh, yeah.
Should it be great?
Thank you. So, Mr.
Oh, it should be.
I remembered it was attributed to him, but I just kind of assumed, sometimes you use one and the same, Yeah.
That shouldn't have anything the last 2 years.
Call this meeting to order.
But you'll get it. Yeah. Better put it on the calendar.
That's interesting. I'll have to do some more reading on it.
It's free.
Okay, we're now going to reconvene our regular meeting. Hear me? Hello, can you hear me? Okay. We are now going to reconvene in our regular meeting. I think we've done the Pledge of Allegiance. Madam Clerk, do you need the roll?
No, I do not. We took it earlier.
Thank you. Okay, I move that we adopt the agenda. Can I get a second?
Well, I'd like to pull number 2.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Councilperson Draper and Mr. Mayor, we're not to the consent agenda yet. We are adopting the overall agenda.
Oh.
Right.
I move that we adopt the agenda.
I'll second that.
Did you want to? Okay, we're going to move on to presentations, proclamations, and oath of office. Tonight we have a proclamation from the City of Oroville for teen violence awareness. Is there someone here to accept this? Thank you. Esmeralda. Okay, we as the City of Oroville and its council members would like to present this proclamation to you, recognizing that February 2019 as National Teen Dating Violence Prevention and Awareness Month. You want me to read it?
I could read it.
You want me to read it?
Yes, please.
Okay, so everyone can know what it says.
Yes.
Whereas 1 in 3 adolescents in the United States is a victim of physical, emotional, sexual, or verbal abuse from a dating partner, a figure that far exceeds victimization rates for other types of violence affecting youth. And whereas women and girls between the ages of 16 and 24 experience the highest rates of intimate partner violence, almost 3 times the national average. And whereas youth who experience violence in a dating relationship are at increased risk of substance abuse, depression, poor academic performance, teen pregnancy, suicide, eating disorders, and carrying patterns of abuse into future relationships. And whereas it is essential to raise community awareness and to provide training for parents, guardians, teachers,
counselors, and school staff so that they may recognize when youth are exhibiting signs of dating violence, including extreme jealousy, constant monitoring, and controlling behavior. And whereas everyone has the right to a safe and healthy relationship and to be free from abuse, now therefore, I, Mayor Chuck Reynolds, do hereby proclaim February 2019 as National Teen Dating Violence Awareness and Prevention Month. I urge all residents of Oroville to support efforts in their schools, community groups, and families to empower young people in learning skills to have safe and healthy relationships. I encourage community leaders to assist those experiencing abuse in finding and accessing information and support services to engage in activities that prevent and respond to dating violence, to prioritize healthy relationships in their own lives, and to engage in discussions with community members of all ages about dating violence prevention in their communities. Thank you. That'll actually bring tears to your eyes. I'm so glad that has been brought to our awareness, because we have no idea what people are going through if we're not paying attention. So I'd just like to encourage everyone to do that. Thank you. Okay. Looking for a motion?
I move that we adopt the consent calendar, exempt item number 2.
I'll second that motion to approve the consent calendar with amendment.
Motion carries.
Mayor, you also have the non-agenda items, and you have a number of speakers who have requested to.
Yes, we're gonna hear about item number 2, though, right?
Great.
First.
Okay.
Thank you.
If I could just take a moment and provide the council some information on how this came about and how we ended up where we're at with the selections that were recommended by the ad hoc committee. The ad hoc committee met on I believe it was the 29th of January, which is made up of Vice Mayor Thompson, Councilman Pittman, and Councilman Smith. They were presented with the applications that we had received. At the time, we had, excuse me, I'm sorry, I can't see with or without my glasses anymore. We had 7 applications for 4 open positions on the Planning Commission. 4 recommendations were made. 2 of those were to reappoint Wyatt Jenkins and Carl Durling, who are now sitting planning commissioners, and then to appoint Susan Sears and Tammy Flicker as planning commissioners. That will bring that commission to its full level. We had only received 7 applications. 3 were not selected. Those were the 2 that were selected. The Home Loan Advisory Committee, we had 1 current opening on there. We currently have another one due to the untimely death of J.R. Simpson. We lost him last week. You know, he was a council person here for many, many years. A very good man. You know, didn't have an unkind bone in his body. He was a good person. I will miss J.R. I hope he's resting peacefully. But with his departure, we also have an opening there. One we received, actually, I don't believe we received any applications for that. We did make the ad hoc committee did make the recommendation to appoint Sherry Bunker to that, the Home Loan Advisory Committee. The Parks Commission had 2 open positions in it currently. Of that, we had received only 2 applications. The 2 applicants were Sherry Bunker and Bobby O'Reilly. Both of those were recommended. So the point is I was just trying to provide some information to let you know how we arrived, or how the ad hoc committee arrived at the recommendations that they did. These are their recommendations on these to bring these commissions and committees up to their full capacity. Staff is looking for direction from the mayor and the council if you wish to move forward as recommended.
Looking for a motion to approve. Does anyone have any comments? Okay. Council Member Goodson.
Thank you, Chief. And I had called earlier. I had spoken to Jackie, our city clerk, in regards to those numbers. So I appreciate that you bringing them forward. And so my concern was the lack of submissions in so many of our committees and boards, specifically Parks Commission. I know that I've been sitting on the dais for 2 years, and out of those 2 years, it is amazing the amount of social media where people weigh in regards to parks. We have had innumerable Facebook pages, BOB, parks this, park that, people that have volunteered, and there have been countless, thousands of comments from the community. And so I was very surprised. I asked how many applications, because surely with that many Facebook pages geared specifically to parks and the thousands of commentaries, we should have been inundated with applications, and to find out that there were only 2. And so I'm speaking not just to the audience here, but the live stream, that when we have these openings, please, Facebook cannot do anything for you. Social media cannot do anything for you. In order for you to have a voice to represent and to cause and create change in our park systems, then you're going to have to put boots on the ground and make those changes. So I would just encourage people to look on our websites periodically, find out when these openings are, and please avail yourselves of the opportunity.
Council Member Draper.
I have a question. On the current Planning Commission, how many of those individuals were real estate agents?
As I look at this, I believe there's only one that I'm aware of.
Okay, well, I was told that there were 2. And with the addition of Tammy Flicker, that would be 3. Is that incorrect?
Oh, the list I have in front of me includes 1. The current sitting commission, as best I recall, I believe there is 1 other real estate agent on there. The other real estate agent was one of the resignations.
Okay, so with the addition of Mrs. Flicker, that would be 1?
2.
That would be, who's the second one?
It would be Randy Chapman. He's also a commissioner.
Okay, so we'd have 2 of the 7 who would be realtors. Okay. Just from my own opinion, I think that there is a specific slant that someone who's in business dealing with real estate would have coming to a planning commission. And I know they can recuse themselves if there's any financial incentive involved. But having said that, they have a mindset and a way of looking at planning that is different from just any individual out there on the street. So I just wanted to bring that up, that it's a concern.
Thank you.
And I know some cities don't even allow realtors on the Planning Commission for that reason. Okay.
Thank you. Do we have a policy that precludes realtors from?
We currently do not, no, sir.
Not at this time.
Thank you. Council Member Smith.
Yeah, I'd like to echo Councilwoman Goodson's comments about the lack of applications, and that's not to cast any disparity on those that apply. They're all fine folk, but really we do need to have more involvement from the constituents, and that's all of you. So I don't know what kind of efforts the city can put forth moving forward in letting people, and sometimes I think it's just an information gap. of the folks just not really being fully aware. And then, who is that qualified person? It is those people that, whether it's BOB or, Facebook weigh-inners, right? But we all have a voice, and we are interested in your voice, and we certainly want to echo the sentiment of the community, and that's why we need you to give us direction, and that's in part what these commissions embody. It's the opportunity for the folks to say, hey, this is what we think in this part of our town, this is how things should be done. And so please, avail yourselves of the opportunity. Give us some direction. Thank you.
Thank you. Vice Mayor Thompson.
2 quick notes. First of all, regarding Randy Chapman and Mrs. Flicker, I believe that their reputation in town precedes them regarding their uprightness and their heart for the community as a whole, and I'm glad that they put their name on the they've applied for this commission. And the second thing is in regarding the citizen, another committee that's actually still open for applications and desperately needs people to apply for. If my memory serves me right, as far as the name of it, is the Citizen Oversight Committee for the 1%.
Yes, sir.
Right now, I believe there's how many applications for that?
1.
And we need how many?
9.
So there's 1 for those watching and those in the room. We need 9. We have 1 application. That was passed with the 1% sales tax regarding having the Citizen Oversight Committee. So if you're interested, if you want to make sure that the city is taking care of the 1% and doing their fiduciary responsibility and making sure that's spent correctly, I urge you, I implore you to put your name and apply for that committee. Again, it's the Citizen Oversight Committee for the 1% sales tax, and that's all I have to say.
Thanks, sir.
Thank you. Councilmember Pittman.
Yeah, and on the Oversight Committee, I'm not sure if we've put the parameters together yet for the recruitment, and we need those folks sitting on that Oversight Committee, so I would hope we get the parameters out there to describe how long, their terms, staggered, all kinds of things there that I'm sure that need to be assembled and put forth in the recruitment.
We'll be bringing that back to the council at the next council meeting for the establishment of that committee, and then we've begun the advertising for that because we've frequently ran into this problem where we advertise on Facebook, city homepage, and different advertising venues, and we seldomly get more than a handful of applicants.
I would also add that when we reviewed applicants, we had considerable reporting on some of the applicants spending time at the Planning Commission, which to me is also a good bellwether. If they're willing to come down here and be at the Planning Commission meetings time and time again, that certainly bodes well to having their appointment to that commission. So certainly is a valuable commodity because it's time consuming, and it's especially the Planning Commission, you have to get in depth with a lot of issues, and I thank the applicants that we did appoint.
Thank you. Are there any public comments or no? Nothing?
No public speakers.
Okay. All right. So we're looking for a motion.
I move that we approve the committee recommendations for the appointments to the Planning Commission, the Housing Loan Advisory Committee, and Parks Commission.
I'll second that.
Motion carries.
Thank you. So, public hearing? Non-agenda items?
Mr. Mayor,
Sorry, guys, still getting the hang of this.
4 speakers. I have Don Foltz up first, and then Albert Stifies. I'm probably going to butcher her last name. I apologize.
Good evening.
Hello.
Welcome, Mayor Reynolds.
Thank you.
Eventually, I'm going to be known as that damn guy. Oh. And again, I'm here to talk about the dam. Climate change is seen in anomalous weather. I was coming home from Chico at 6:30 this morning and 3 inches of snow and hail on the road. It was just strange. It is seen as less predictable weather patterns, and this remains a problem for Oroville Dam with dilapidated spillway gates and an emergency spillway that is not a spillway at all. Increasing earthquake activity around the globe, especially in the Pacific Rim area, of which we are a part, is also a concern for an earth-filled dam. It is important to know from day to day what the integrity of dam structures is. Oroville Dam has and does have problems with monitoring devices. As well, if a problem became apparent and water needed to be released below the level of the spillway, perhaps to lessen or avoid a catastrophe, there is no efficient way to do that. The river valves are still broken, and the powerhouse is still not functioning at capacity. It's a lot for a city council to keep up with, even if they had a desire to do so. The Feather River Recovery Alliance is doing their best to keep up with the situation and could use the collaborative assistance of City Hall. They don't want your money. They know you have none. They would like a reconsideration of agreements the city has with the Department of Water Resources, and to think about DWR's history when it comes to their behavior after a relicensing takes place. I'm not a member of FFRA, but I do attend their meetings and keep up with the information they make available. Perhaps the city should too. Thanks.
Thank you.
Albert Stifel, and then Bill Spear.
I'm not really here to ask for some action. I'm here to, I don't know what I'm here for. I pick up litter, a friend and I pick up litter all over greater Oroville area. And we recycle it, and the CRV stuff goes to a fund at our church that puts out a meal ticket for people that need food. And we recycle things and all of that. But what concerned me was sometime back I had a policeman come up to me and threaten me that I was not to pick up any needles or syringes or anything like that. And I tried to explain to him that I didn't want to leave those things laying around where kids could pick them up. So, and I said, I'm not really saving them, because if I want to save them, I wouldn't throw them in my litter bag and let them get all dirty with the litter and everything. And I said the Oroville Hospital was kind enough to accept these syringes and litter and syringes and needles and stuff and get rid of them properly. And so my big concern is that this policeman that came up and threatened me for having needles and stuff, he was going to arrest me and put me in jail. And I just wondered if we could sort of get some information out that, you know, just people that, I mean, I pick up after a parade and stuff like that. I know the city comes by and with a street cleaner and does the streets and that, but my friend and I, we do the sidewalks and the people's yards that are getting litter. And it's been a wonderful, wonderful experience. I've had nothing but good, friendly meetings with people. I've never been threatened, and I better shut up. Okay.
Thank you. I want to thank you for your service, sir. Thank you for doing that.
Bill Spear, and then Randy Murphy.
Mr. Mayor, City Council. Well, first of all, I noticed that you changed the amount of time for speakers from 3 minutes to 2 minutes, and I would encourage you guys to rethink that and change it back to 3. You know, people in the city come to voice, put in our 2 cents, or I guess it's 2 minutes now, and to encourage people to come and participate. I don't think it's encouraging us too much. You know, they might get more applications and more people putting in their 2 cents if we're a little more user friendly. Not everybody uses the whole amount of time, but some people, like the guy from the water place, you know, don't really have the ability to give the full information that they're wanting to give without being rushed. We're a small town. The place is hardly ever full. So I would just ask you guys to reconsider that. But the reason I came really is to pray. So, Father, I thank you for our new city council and for the opportunity, Lord, to lift our city up and pray for our leaders. And I pray an anointing upon them, Lord, that you would give them wisdom. In your holy word, it says, if anyone lacks wisdom, let him ask God, who gives generously to all, and it will be given. So I'm asking in the name of Jesus for wisdom for our city, for guidance through these trials that we face in finances, and as we step up to help the people of Paradise in our community, as we face all these challenges with the water. And we know that there are solutions, that there is a source, that you have plans for our city, plans to prosper and not to harm, for hope in a future. So we approach your throne, asking in the mighty name of Jesus. Amen. Thank you.
Thank you.
Randy Murphy.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor and Council. I'd like to read a miss out of Saturday's paper. Speaking of Riverbend Park, it is the prime recreational facility in Oroville, or at least it would be if some dorks in town would let it get reopened. The park was ravaged during the Oroville Dam spillway crisis in February of 2017, with several feet of water flowing swiftly over the park. Pretty much everything that could be destroyed was destroyed, from the turf on the soccer fields to the irrigation system and other infrastructure. Since the water went down, the Feather River Rec and Park District has been working to restore and reopen the park. It was opened briefly in time for the 4th of July in 2017, but then closed again for the major restoration projects that were needed. But that didn't stop vandals from breaking in repeatedly and trashing the electrical system in search of copper wire to sell. The big attack was last April and set back the opening 6 months and cost the district and the taxpayers $60,000. The most recent one, actually there were two, cost another $27,000 and spawned another delay in opening. The new target date is mid-February. It's appalling that someone would put their interests above the needs of their community as a whole, but that's what's happening here. We'd hope the community is annoyed because it's likely there's someone out there who knows who's responsible. It needs to be stopped. This comments echo pretty much what I told the paper. I assume most of you saw the article that was written. I was also interviewed by the TV news. Somebody knows. This work is being done by somebody who knows electrical business. They're not killing themselves, which suggests they have an intimate knowledge of how to dismantle electrical wires and not give themselves a new hairdo. The point is, we need it to stop. We need somebody in one of the recycle yards nearby is complicit in this. So I asked the mayor via an email earlier this week, please agendize this, ideally at the next meeting, so we can get some direction from the council.
Thank you. Is that it for speakers?
That was the last speaker, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, let's see. Moving on to number 7, an urgency ordinance regarding temporary residential use of recreational vehicles, mobile homes, and manufactured housing units.
I'm not sure, Mr. Huber, whether you're going to present this or I am, but you might guess.
I'm more than happy to if you want.
Sure.
Mr. Mayor, and I'll be formal. Mr. Mayor and council members, this is an amendment to the urgency ordinance that was passed previously regarding utilization of mobile home units, and we're expanding the definition to mobile homes and manufactured housing units. For simplification of understanding what the amendments are, the strikeouts, the language we're deleting is in strikeout, and the language we're adding is in underlined fashion in the draft. Essentially, we're if this is approved, it would allow mobile homes and manufactured housing units to go on any residential property that's currently zoned for residential, You could have up to 6 mobile homes or manufactured homes per acre, or you could have 1 unit per parcel if you already have for example, if a subdivision map has already been recorded and lots have already been subdivided, you could put 1 manufactured home on each residential unit. This is not the Wild West where anybody can do it. It's got to be in support of those who lost their homes. It also is for a limited period of time. Once the time period ends, the recreational vehicle, mobile home, or manufactured housing unit would have to come off the property. So this is not for an indefinite period of time, and it is in support of those who lost their homes and are rebuilding, or those who are temporarily, staying somewhere while they look for permanent housing. There is an additional component to this where there is an administrative process whereby a permit would be necessary. Nobody could just go and put something on a lot that they own. They would have to come and get a permit. It has to be connected to electricity, water, sewer, or some system to deal with black water. And again, it all needs to be approved by administration. But that's essentially what this is. It's an ordinance that is intended to aid those who are suffering from the Camp Fire in getting back on their feet. It is for a finite period of time. And again, in the ordinance, it specifically does. Usually, when you put a building on a piece of property, you get to keep it there until you decide to take it off. This ordinance specifically does not allow items to remain beyond the expiration of the ordinance. So the right that is associated with this does not run with the land. It is with the permit only. Once the permit expires, you have to remove it. I'm happy to entertain any questions or concerns you may have.
I'm in the queue too. Are you already?
Okay.
Councilmember Draper.
Okay. I just have a question about this part where it says, for those parts of the city of Oroville most severely impacted by the Camp Fire. Now, to my way of thinking, Oroville, the city of Oroville, has not been directly affected by the Camp Fire, so I'm not sure what areas this is referring to.
Can you tell me which section you're looking at?
Well, it's on the recommendation on the agenda, where it says adopt urgency ordinance, yada yada, to add mobile homes, manufactured housing units for those parts of the city of Oroville most severely impacted by the Camp Fire.
There are certain neighborhoods and certain areas that have more individuals camping on them. That's what we're talking about.
Okay, so you mean areas of Oroville that have been impacted?
Yes.
In that way. Okay. Thank you.
Councilmember Goodson.
So my question is in reference to in addition to the adoption of this ordinance in regards to the waiver of the per unit sewer fee. Could you give a little more specificity on that?
Sure.
I need clarification on in exchange for installation of the sewer line. And so after the sunset period, will it go back to its original status? What's going to happen to that installation of the new sewer line?
So let me take one step backwards from that for just a moment. So there are two components in the sewer fee. There is the fee that goes to SCORE for the wastewater treatment,
right?
And then there's a fee that goes to the city. The city fee typically goes for installation of the line to upkeep the city's portion of the sewer. Mm-hmm. The line that is going to be installed, if someone comes in and says, I'm going to put 6 of these units on this acre parcel that I own, if they agree to install the line in the ground, then we will waive the fee. Okay. If once that is in the ground, it's transferred to the city. So ownership of that line would then be owned by the city in exchange for waiving the fee.
and I want to clarify, and if it's not in this ordinance, we probably need to amend it, and that is that when a permanent structure is built, they will in fact pay that fee, because it's for the larger lines throughout the city besides the expansion of the actual service line. But for these units, if they can extend the line, I think it's a reasonable exemption. But again, when permanent housing is built, they need to pay it.
And I don't think we would need to amend it, because that's the basic understanding is when you pull a permit for a permanent housing, you have to pay it.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Huber. Are there any speakers on this?
We have a speaker, right? Yeah.
Sorry. Yes, there's one public speaker, Jennifer Jones.
Mr. Mayor, if this is a public hearing, if you could open the public hearing prior to the speaker.
Oh, sorry. We're gonna open it now for public hearing. Thank you.
Jennifer Jones.
Hi. It's nice to be here.
Hi.
I want to say thank you for coming up with some kind of solution for this problem. You may have seen me on the news. I have a property that's right outside city limits, past Feather Falls, and the police they raided my house. They raided it. It wasn't a nice visit at all. The attitude towards evacuees around here is sorely lacking any kind of compassion. It's really difficult to deal with. I'm not the only one doing this, housing people on my property. There are many people who've reached out to me because of the public exposure, and they're scared. They don't know, they don't know what's going on. They don't know what to do. And, on my property, personally, I am on septic. And if I have to build another septic, fine, or get someone to come out and drain it, fine. So sewage is not something that we need to worry about. But I want to make sure that I can go back and reassure these people that, they're not going to get attacked like I did. Because not only did I get surprised on my property and they blocked my road so no one could come in or out, and they blocked my driveway so no one could come in or out. There was no introductions. There was no, hey, let's work something out. It was no, the evacuees need to go. And everyone at my property who had just finally calmed down from it, were trying to get their bearings from this. I'm not requiring any payment. I'm trying to let them, they're going through an emotional thing here. It's not just, oh, my property, this or that. And this caused a complete uproar right when they were finally comfortable. And I think that the way the County Code Enforcement Office handled that was probably some of the worst display of humanity I've ever seen. But they also have gone after my grandmother because technically she still owns the property. She just gave it over to me. We haven't switched it over or anything yet. And they're threatening to fine her. And so she calls me last night freaking out about this. And I'm trying to reassure her, I've got 2 lawyers involved. And, sorry, with Paradise, with what's happening in Paradise, we're going to have a lot more people coming down here because they just passed the ordinance to kick everybody off.
Thank you. You realize that our sphere of influence is in the city limits.
I do understand that, and technically I'm an Oroville resident, but I do unfortunately sit right outside of it, so that is within the county, and I understand that, but I'm not in a city, so...
Right.
So what does that mean for me? If the county code enforcement's out there, they're from the city of Oroville.
Oh, they're from Butte County.
Butte County.
From Butte
Okay.
County.
Yes.
Where would be the best place for me to go?
Board of Supervisors.
Okay.
Yes.
Thank you.
Or connect with Chris Jellison of Code Enforcement.
Yeah. Or
county.
Gentleman by the name of Tim Snellings is in charge of the department. I think he's the one you probably ought to sit down with.
Okay.
And I'll be happy to provide his contact information.
Absolutely, and you can see that where our jurisdiction lies,
Right.
we're taking care of.
I wasn't entirely sure about it, obviously.
There's obviously a need, and we're taking care of that, and I would expect that the county would do the same.
So this ordinance won't mean anything for me anyways.
No.
But at least it's happening. So.
Well, it's precedent set. I would take this to the county and speak to them.
All right.
Yes.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you. Is that it for the speakers?
That is the only speaker that I have.
Okay, looking for a motion for item number 7.
I move that we adopt the urgency ordinance number 1836.
I second that.
Motion carries.
Okay, moving on to regular business. Number 8, SGMA Wyandotte Creek GSA board member and alternate appointment.
Mayor and Council, this is Mike Massaro, Contract City Engineer. I'm serving on the management committee of the new GSA, and as we rescinded our city's GSA and joined this GSA with Thermalito Water and Sewer and Butte County, we are obligated to provide a board member as well as an alternate. There are 3 standing board members with Thermalito and Butte County, and then there are 2 more will be appointed. We're trying to get our first board meeting set up so we can get the other 2 board members appointed and get the bylaws adopted and get this thing off the ground. So we need to have a plan in place in a few years here. So I'm looking for the council to put forward 2 members, 1 for regular membership and 1 for alternate.
Thank you. Councilman Smith.
Yeah, I'm not sure if this comment completely applies to this, but it's to the bigger picture of the engineering service. As I understand it, the city was not able to provide us the cost for the engineering service because that's contracted. So, in other words, if I understood it correctly in the agenda packet, that you would have to provide or participate in that process along with the city appointment as well, and that the impact or cost, Tom, was not able to be given to us regarding the cost for the engineering services because this is an ongoing. This has now become an ongoing animal, if you will, that we have to grapple with.
Councilman Smith, this is not a engineering contract or amendment or agreement with that. This is a separate board. It's groundwater sustainability.
I understand that, but as a part of that we have to have an engineer participate on that board.
Yes.
So there's a real cost to the city. I would assume that they're not doing that gratis.
The consulting engineer?
The consulting engineer.
If you would like an additional or a presentation on this and what the costs of this are, this item is appointing somebody to the board.
Okay.
We can bring this back if you like to bring you up to speed on this. This is a very complicated and
I understand
complex issue, so it probably would be best if you'd like if we could bring that back to you.
Yeah, I would like us to revisit that piece. That's why I kind of started off with my comment may not be totally appropriate to the item here, but certainly I would like that.
And I guess I want to add to that this is mandatory, that these groundwater management plans are required by state law now. So we have to participate. It's a question of, from your perspective, who actually sits on this.
Absolutely. I too would like more information before we make an appointment. So can we table this to the next meeting?
Sure. No reason not to.
Okay. I just want to make sure that there's a distinction between a city staff member sitting on the management committee versus the board appointee. So one member of your council will need to sit on the board of this GSA, regardless of the management committee member for the city. And then there are other members, ad hoc committees that are nominated to support. It's all volunteer, and those are in that capacity to provide stakeholder comment. So there's staff support for the work of the GSP, and each of the member agencies are effectively donating time to support that effort through, in our case, we would be offering the council chambers for the meetings and some support of administrative staff to administrate those meetings. And then,
but we certainly can provide more information.
Right.
Bring it back.
Absolutely. Thank you. So I'd like to move that we table item number
Oh, looks like we have some speakers. Councilmember Goodson.
I'm curious, what are the meeting times, dates? So,
to be determined. We're trying to get that first meeting set up once all the board members are nominated and seated. So Butte County's already put forward their member. Thermalito's already put forward a member and alternate. And they're just waiting on us, City of Oroville, to bring forward a board member and an alternate so that we can agendize the first meeting and get those elements set up. Regular meeting times, but we did talk about this at the last management meeting. And they talked about likely monthly over the first 6 months until the bylaws are adopted and a lot of the appointees are seated, and then probably quarterly thereafter.
All right, thank you. I just needed some.
And a lot of this stuff will be answered in our additional questions. Councilman Pittman?
Yeah, I served on the water board prior to this, and essentially what's going on here is the state of California passed a law that you've got to manage your groundwater, and if you don't, they will. That's the issue. So if we don't participate and manage our groundwater, they have a plan to come in and take over. So I highly recommend anyone to serve on this committee, and I've done it before, and it's fine. I would encourage someone else because it's having knowledge of the Tuscan aquifer and all those kind of things. It's a very valuable thing, and I certainly suggest our participation, because if we don't, the state of California will.
How soon did you need someone to step in?
They were hoping to get the first meeting going at the end of February or beginning of March, according to our current timeline. But
okay, but I personally need more information too before we make an appointment on this. So we'd like to re-agendize this for the next meeting.
We can meet that timeline. We'll have it, bring it back
Absolutely.
on the 19th with a presentation. Mike will be happy to make a presentation, and Mr. Massaro doesn't necessarily have to attend these meetings. It could be another staff member as opposed to our contract engineer. I know Ruth has expressed extreme interest in going to this. So
yes, absolutely.
You know.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So do we need a motion on that we?
No, sir.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Mayor, can staff continue item number 9 until the next meeting as well?
We can. Thank you.
Sure.
Number 10, request for residential use of recreational vehicles, mobile homes and manufactured housing units at City Corporation Yard.
So you have a letter from the North Valley Community Foundation. They would like to, they're getting donated 100 mobile home manufactured homes, which they would like to place on the corporation yard. I believe the chief last time discussed the idea of fencing them off from the rest of the corporation yard, and ultimately both putting solar and perhaps using that for overflow parking. This would strictly be for employee housing. The idea of the North Valley Community Foundation is they want to help the local economy by having ensuring at least 100 worker families have housing. So that's the request in front of you. We would, if you agree to proceed, we would negotiate a lease agreement, and that would talk about terms and payments. Although it is a short-term use, just like the other ordinance resolution, you talked about.
Thank you. Councilmember Pittman, are you in the queue?
No.
You're gone now?
I'm done.
Any speakers on this item?
I have one speaker, Sherry Bunker.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, Council. I just kind of have a problem with having these folks on at the Corp Yard. It's not the best place in the world to be. It's like when they wanted to put those folks down there across the street from the SCORE building or the SCORE plant. There are several, if they've got the money to, and I'm not trying to take money out of the city's pockets, but there's a couple of places on Mitchell that certain entities wanted to purchase that could be used to put those trailers on. I think that would be a much better use of that space, since it's already pretty much housing in that area. I just don't think the Corp Yard is the right place for this.
Thank you. The space that she's talking about is about a half a block from the Corporation Yard. And is this revenue creating for the city?
This would be potentially revenue creating. I don't want to say it's going to be huge, because it's not. Mm-hmm. The idea is that they could move fairly quickly if we have the property and the city's willing. And again, the idea was let's house employees so we keep them in the community. I would slightly disagree with I think it's different being across from the sewer plant in terms of then being next to the yard. I don't see the impact. I'm just disagreeing, and I understand you disagree with me. So.
Mm-hmm. Is this space being utilized? Remember, we at capacity. It's not where.
I'll let the chief respond.
Do we need this? Is it immediate need for this space for the city?
No, the long-term idea or thoughts for that particular area was to create an overflow parking situation for Harrison Stadium. So this is both, not only is it going to be, will have some financial advantageous component to it, but also logistically it will, because infrastructure will be put in place that we will be able to utilize in the future for the solar project that's going in there to help generate power for the city, for the covered parking, for the eventual parking lot that's going to end up there. So this will do the groundwork necessary to put that in place. Right now, all that's down there is old mattresses, tires, garbage, and a pile of dirt.
All staples of the city. Yes. Councilmember Pittman.
Well, I, as a temporary housing, I have no problem with this. And I also see the potential of having overflow parking, or at least a facility for that. It's been a problem for almost decades now, ever since the stadium was rebuilt. And we've looked at doing overflow parking on so many different venues. I just see this as a potential win-win. Especially, we're talking about the storage yard and back. Is that accurate? Okay. And are they going outside the existing fence or inside the existing fence?
No, from behind the, you're familiar with the wash rack down there and
right.
where they park the aerial. From the back of the metal building there, which would be, to people that aren't familiar with it, when you're looking into the yard, it would be the westmost building in the yard. We're going to fence straight across, or this, the people making the request to do this will put fencing across there all the way back to the back of the corporation yard.
Are there any operations that are going to be hindered by this with the city?
It will not hinder any operations by the city. It will require us to work with BCAG to move their buses to the other side of our corporation yard where the old natural gas filling plant was at.
Councilman Smith.
Yeah, maybe you can speak to perhaps safety concerns. I have a little bit of experience in RV park operations. Given you use the word families, I think, or I heard the word families brought up. So typically in that environment, there would be that expectation that some of those folks are going to have kiddos, and someone that's going to be, remaining there and living there. And so what kind of thoughts have been given to, safety for children? That gives kids do stuff, right? And nothing more appealing than a maintenance yard with equipment in it. So perhaps just to kind of mitigate any of those types of concerns, what's in place, or maybe there's things for them to do, or safety barriers, that type of thing.
Again, Councilman Smith, I really can't answer most of those questions. North Valley Community Foundation has simply told us they'd like to house employees. I assumed, so that was my guess, that there'd be families incorporated in that. Okay. The fencing would, I believe, deter them from the entrance to the yard, but I really can't answer the questions about the children and that aspect of it.
Okay, so did we take into consideration a proper, like easement and, safety measures as far as distance and
We will in terms of layout, absolutely.
Okay, and
Absolutely.
appropriate layout. So
Yes.
just, I'm just, as long as we've considered those things, I mean, I think it's a great idea.
We
good
will,
utilization
and the
of property.
density, personally, I'm going to talk about myself. When I visualize a manufactured housing or mobile home, I visualize a very dense development. These are not that dense. In fact, typically they're about the same density as a single-family development. I will say we're also talking about, and haven't finalized plans, but maybe housing worker short-term for our senior project at the same location.
Councilman Hatley.
Thank you. I asked this before, and refresh my memory, if you will, please. Because we did have some choke points in the sewer lines going down that side of town. And I can't remember what you told me as far as, have those been taken care of, or is there still some concern?
I believe we have some concern with that line still. Any of the necessary components of that to install this type of a situation, I believe this foundation has agreed to pay for. But we do have, in that particular line, there's been for years, there's been some choke points in it that are eventually going to have to be taken out, but those have not been done to this point.
Okay, well, and that will be addressed through this project, or
I'm not sure that the primary lines, the trunk lines, will have any choke points addressed through this project, but the tying in of the units will. It'll be something that we're going to have a discussion with them and see where they're at and what they are willing to do.
Yeah, I just didn't want, we've run into some problems where we have choke points and different things and backups, and just trying to avoid it if we can.
I think one of the things we probably should do for you is to send our sewer crew down there and get that all cameraed and see if what is going to be the complete impact of this, because we don't want to certainly put this down there and then have a major sewer backup or a big sewer problem down there. So I will talk with the sewer supervisor tomorrow and ask him to inspect that line and tell us from his best experienced estimation what are going to be the impacts of this.
Okay, thank you.
Council Member Goodson.
I have a couple of questions. One, who suggested this site? Number two, what other sites were explored that would be more conducive to families, or is the focus on future infrastructure improvements for the benefit of the city?
This was strictly suggested by the North Valley Community Foundation. It was their idea. They approached the city.
To use the corporation yard?
Yes.
All right. Thank you.
Okay. So we're looking for direction to give direction to move forward. Except item number 10. Is there a motion?
Can we then weigh in a little more as far as direction? I would want to see some kind of layout, because typically when you set up I've set up a few RV parks, so I have some background in this, professionally speaking. So I'd just like to see some, a basic layout, because typically that's even required by the state. That's done. I don't know what kind of exceptions, given maybe the circumstances surrounding this.
I'm sorry.
I'm just saying that it would just be nice before we fully approve this, just that we know that those things are taken into consideration.
And my assumption is they will treat it much like FEMA does, which is both low density and provides recreational space. And certainly, we're going to have to bring back the lease agreement, so we can certainly bring back the layout.
I'll make a motion that we move forward with this project pending the new information that's brought back to us as the project moves along.
I second that. Okay.
So, clarification, what is the information that we're requesting to bring back?
We're going to, if this is approved, staff will negotiate a lease agreement, so that has to be approved by you. We'll attach to it a site layout.
All right. Thank you.
Come on, vote.
Motion carries.
Thank you. Okay, moving on to council announcements, discussions, future agenda items. Does anyone have anything they'd like to put on the next agenda? Councilman Pittman?
Yeah, thank you. Appreciate that. I've had a number of contacts with a variety of folks in the town about the urgency ordinance number 1832, which related to rentals and that kind of activity. And I'm not sure if it was missed, but some folks have raised the issue that the way the ordinance came in, it said no increases allowed at all. The state standard is an increase of 10%, as I understand it. I'm curious why we would exceed the state standard, and in order to change it, would it have to be brought back to council for interpretation?
It would, and I've actually been doing some research on that, but I'm going to respond in writing to those individuals. But basically, what happened because the state cap is 10%. Once the incident occurred, from the time that the fire occurred to the time of the council meeting, everything that was available went up by 10% already. So by saying everything that was on the market that was available was snapped up immediately, people were raising. We were hearing of month-to-month tenants, getting their rent was increased by 10% already, and so the ordinance said you can't raise it any further, because the understanding that we had was that everything that was available to be raised by 10% had already been raised by 10%. I think if memory serves me, and again, this is part of the research I need to do, but I thought we were saying you couldn't raise it beyond the state limit. And this is where I'll have to take a look at it, but.
And that's really the only point I'm looking at is I have no problem with the state limit. I have a problem with zero because that creates other problems that I'm not sure that, and I wasn't on the council when it was brought forward. It creates other problems, especially why we as a city would exceed the state limit. I have to say that we need to find out why that would be chosen.
I will tell you candidly, the intent was to make it the state limit, not to exceed the state limit. The intent was to mirror what the state requires, and give landlords notice there, that you can't raise it beyond the state limit. But
Well, I'd look forward to any clarification to that, or if we need to re-agendicize and make it clear, that's fine with me.
Vice Mayor Thompson.
I would like to propose, potentially, if it can be approved, for the discussion on our next council for a utility user tax waiver for low-income families and elderly. I know that Chico has this waiver. I've talked to Ruth about this, and so I think it's important for us, now that the 1% sales tax is passed, to at least discuss it as a council. A waiver, again, specifically for people who are at least low income and elderly. And again, we can do it whatever we want. We could say, well, it goes into effect a year from now after we see the effects of the 1%. But I think we deserve, or the citizens of Oroville at least deserve, to have us discuss it.
I have a question about that.
Councilperson
Ruth,
Draper.
typically, how much would you estimate that utility users tax would be on a typical bill?
Oh, on a typical bill, it's 5% of whatever the bill is, or 4.5% for different types of utilities. 4.5% to 5%.
Okay.
And as a side note, just for council to know, again, Chico already has this, and those who actually apply for it it's pretty minimal. So it's put out there as available for people, but the amount of people actually who request it is pretty small. But I personally believe, I know that we needed money as a city. I think the government always wants money, and having our city count or city lines, as weird as they are, a moose with a squirrel on it, or however you want to picture the lines, is so weird. that you have those living on one side of the street paying for it and those on the other side aren't. I was in favor of the sales tax because that affects everybody who lives in the region, whereas the utility user tax only affects those who live within the city limits, and I don't think it's necessarily fair to the citizens of Oroville as a whole. So in the balance of needing money, and again, we can't necessarily go as far as openly discussing this right now. I think putting on the agenda to at least discuss it is important, and that's what I'm asking at this point. But a tax cut for those who are elderly and have low income.
Thank you. Is that it for announcements? Or? Councilmember Goodson.
I'd like to agendize the city council to discuss. There are alleyways in our city that are in dire need of cleanups. They're a safety hazard. And so I would like us to explore what that would look like in terms of the cleanup, timelines. I know that we're experiencing a lot of bad weather right now, but I just wanted people to be aware that we do have a situation that needs to be addressed in regards to our alleyways. Moving on, Saturday, February 3rd was the Lu Mian Chinese New Year. I, along with City Councilwoman Linda Draper, we were guests of Butte College. We were also asked to speak on that platform. It was well attended, and I just wanted to say that as part of my presentation, I encourage anyone, but I see that there's such a need for diversity in our committees, on our boards, on city council. In order for us to move forward and be effective, we need representation from all cultures to be more well-rounded. And so I did encourage the Lu Mian community to become involved in the city affairs, to come to city council meetings, and to start bridging that gap of communication.
Councilmember Smith.
I think it's time to start the conversation regarding a city engineer. On the consent agenda, we essentially dealt with $120,000 in new expenditures for an engineer, and I'm very hopeful that in the coming weeks and months, you're going to have more than you know what to do with over there, Gary. In the way of planning and just dealing with all the things that are coming at the city, and kind of a prelude to the conversation regarding, the issue of the water and having an engineer involved with that. I just see a lot of moving pieces coming together, coalescing, all good. And so sometimes you have to spend money to save money. And so I think if we had an opportunity to do the math on the cost that we're, no offense to our contracted engineer over there, but I certainly think that we probably might be approaching that threshold where if we had a city engineer, we'd actually save money given all the workload that's now going to be coming. So I'd like to have that explored.
I agree with that.
Councilmember Draper.
Well, I also attended, as Ms. Goodson said, and it was a gratifying evening, and the people were wonderful, so friendly, and I ran into several former students there, and one of the things I mentioned was that a lot of what I've learned of the Min culture is from students I had in my classes over 20 years at Las Plumas High School, and their commitment to family and to education is really commendable, and I love the way that they strive to retain their culture. I think that's so important. The other event I attended was the Martin Luther King Breakfast and Award Program. And Ms. Goodson was in charge of a lot of that program. The students who won scholarships were from diverse backgrounds, and so that was kind of a nice thing as well.
Thank you. So,
Mr. Mayor?
Yes.
Could I just get clarification on the items suggested? These are all, I think, very good topics for us to have discussions on. Is it the direction of the council to bring these items back?
Yes.
Each item, as a council person brings it forward, takes the council person plus one other council person to put that on the agenda. Or
and I seconded what Eric suggested as regarding the engineer.
Thank you, sir.
I'll second Councilwoman Goodson's request about the
Yes, ma'am.
alleyway cleanup.
And my suggestion might be clarification from the city attorney.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Is there anything else you needed?
No, sir.
You heard a
Mr.
second
Lamb.
for the utility tax? Because I didn't.
Oh, I thought we did.
A second on the utility tax discussion? Yes.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you. Well, I think that was administration reports too, wasn't it?
You don't get off that easy.
I don't get off that easy? Okay. All right, well, we're going to move on to administration reports then. Councilperson Draper?
Oh, you mean committee reports?
Com-
I already did. I have no
Oh,
committee
yeah,
meetings,
committee
but
re-
I have some
committee.
coming up this month.
Okay. All right. Oh, yeah. Administration. That would be you guys. We've already reported.
Us guys. I just want to let the council know that our annual audit was finally completed last Thursday. So I'll be bringing something back on the next council meeting for information on how that came out. I've been asked to look into getting a franchise fee audit for the city, so I'm looking into that. And FEMA, I'll be gone all day Thursday to the Cal OES. There's a workshop on how to submit the claims. I've been really busy with FEMA claims and trying to get everything all together for us to be reimbursed on the campfire. And also, I was going to mention that we're going to be scheduling budget workshops soon. So I think we were going to target maybe March. We did them in April last year, move them up a little bit, have them in March, and add, I think I want to add a whole component on the CalPERS issue because there's a lot of information and that's one of our major expenditures that's rising. So I think we'll add that component to the expenditure part of our budget workshop. But that's all I have.
And with that, just a tail end off that, aren't we also thinking about potentially doing the goal setting during the same time?
Yeah.
Goal setting workshop with the budget?
Yes, I did have one more thing too, sorry. I really want to ask for your patience on this OpenGov project. I've went down a path and I'm hitting some roadblocks, and the latest roadblock was cost. So I'm going back to the intern idea, and I think Liz has a lead in on an intern that wants to spend 15 to 20 hours with us a week, and that will be the first thing I put them on if it works out. So I'm really trying because it's only me that can get it done at this point. I don't have anybody to train on that. So hopefully the intern works out. I know that you've been waiting for a presentation, but I just want to ask for your patience that I am working on it. Thank you.
Thank you, Ruth. Bill?
I have nothing.
Tom?
Just very quickly, sit on the coordinating committee for the recovery in Paradise, and I know the town and county can't say this, but FEMA seems to change its position fairly frequently, including on housing. So if you haven't heard now, the major housing complex, it looks like it's going to be up at the Tuscan Ridge Golf Course. PG&E moves out, it looks like that's where they're going to put a large number of these manufactured homes. That's all I have.
Thank you. Nothing? Gary?
We did issue 14 building permits out at Links today. I have also issued a couple additional single-family dwelling permits, and have had applications come in for other housing projects within the city. Ross should be opening in March. Chief will let you know about that. And also wanted to give a reminder about the project walks downtown. Unfortunately, Thursday, the Washington building has canceled the Thursday appointment. So, and also might want to check with our council to see if it's a conflict or of the Brown Act on these meetings and walking these sites. One is, Dave, I know that you had scheduled for Thursday. If there's a possibility for Wednesday, one is valuable with your experience in fire to see the Washington building and how they come together.
Walk in the basement.
You would be amazed.
Surprised.
So you'd be quite surprised with what's happened there and how we make things work, and what's going on with the city.
Gary, you had a walk with these sites today. How many people showed up?
One.
Could you identify that person, please?
That was Chuck Reynolds, the mayor.
And tomorrow, who will be going on that walk? Could you identify the two?
That's right.
Yes.
We'll have Janet Goodson and Linda Draper.
Thank you.
And whoever else can.
Projections don't count.
Yeah.
Mike, did you have anything?
Nothing to add.
Okay, thank you. Joanna, Jackie, nothing? We're good?
Mr. Mayor?
Council Member Goodson's looking for an update on the property on South 7th of what's going on with the recycling. If someone can comment on that.
Really, all I can tell you is it's a permitted use. FEMA has apparently, because we haven't had any discussion in our meetings about this, decided that they're going to handle all the material locally in places and recycle it. So the metal's going there. They have 2 concrete locations. I know, Gary, I'm going to task you here. I know that they came in for some type of permit.
Yeah, a grading permit has been issued, and they do have the application and permits applied for with the state as well. There will be surface material going on that will meet the city requirements for dust control as well.
Great,
Thank you.
Mr. Mayor, prior to closing the meeting, would you consider calling for a moment of silence for Al J.R. Simpson, our council member that we lost last week?
I would. If I could take a minute, Randy, you asked for something to be on the agenda. What was that? I'm sorry, I tried to write it down while you were talking.
The theft of the copper.
Yeah, no worries. I was seeking direction or requesting the council to provide direction to city staff to work with the district. I didn't make that clear because I was watching the clock. But to help work with the district in providing some options to the problems with vandalism and arguably the homeless, although in this instance I don't believe the homeless were responsible for the vandalism. Somebody had a truck and they likely weren't homeless. So again, the idea is it's going to take a village, and we need to work together to solve the problem.
Great.
Is there something particular that you're asking for?
I'm
not sure this is an agenda item so much as do you want to have a discussion with staff or
It's a combination. Part of it is actually driven by the Park Watch issue, and the idea is for them to provide a presentation, and the outcome of that would be ideally, staff, let's help build this up as a city, partly to make an announcement to the community, look, we need more help. And partly also to help, again, provide some direction to staff to work with the district and helping solve the problem. And maybe it's, It's a property crime, so it's never high. And I don't mean to diminish what the police department does, but as short-staffed as they are, it's not a high priority. But they've taken over $100,000 worth of copper wire in the last year from the district. Mm-hmm. And maybe it's work that we could do together to get the DA involved and do a sting. Like I said, I suspect one of these scrap yards is complicit in this. Otherwise, they wouldn't have a market in which to sell it. So
sure. Okay. Well, thank you. I think there probably needs to be more discussion by us before we agendize that. But thank you very much. Okay.
I was reminded that the Exchange Club of Oroville has offered a $500 reward through the secret witness program for the arrest and conviction of individuals, and I suspect it's plural, that are involved in this process as well. Vandalism to our park.
Thank you. Okay. Correspondence. Is there someone going to comment on? They're all attached. Okay. Well, I guess that. Moment of silence for J.R. Simpson. Just an absolute model citizen. I knew him all my life, and nothing but a gentleman, and a real heart for the city. And I don't think that anyone can contest that. He was just a wonderful asset, and we would like to give him a moment of silence, please. Thank you. And with that, it adjourns our meeting.
Mr. Mayor, as a reminder, we need to go back into closed session for item number 3 on the closed session agenda.
Absolutely. So we are adjourned till when? When's the next meeting? February 19th, 2019 at 5:30. Thank you.
And honestly,
because I'm very visual, he can't. We don't need them to hammer us.
and I do too. I take little things, and those kinds of comments.
Have a good night.
So I need a better way of.
Yeah, they are what they are.
Yeah, but
I don't put any.
Up here drawing flowers and
Right. No,
actually.
and I never expect personally. I never thought that at all.
I hope most people don't. But,
Yeah,
when people say that,
people say a lot of stuff. Yeah,
But yeah, I know what I'm doing.
Sure. Yep.